Good afternoon, everybody, and it's another weekly roundup on Socialist Telly, now badged Ordinary Left as opposed to Labour Left, thanks to the success that new movement is having. And I'm delighted to welcome on Damo, Cornish Damo from Socialist Telly, and I think she's now ready to come in and join us. Bonnie Craven there also from the gang. So welcome, everybody. Thank you to everyone who's joining us for this, and if you're watching on Catch Up as well, thank you for that. Don't forget to do the usual clickety bits and make sure you subscribe and get notified when any new stuff comes out. So it's been quite a week in political terms. Certainly no shortage of things to talk about on this programme. And we normally let Damo start off with a little rant. Have you got anything ready for us there, son?
Yeah, I might have something. I had to do a lot of looking around. As you know, it's been ever such a quiet week this week, Steve. Well, Tories grasping and taking for themselves at the expense of everyone else. And, well, Matt Hancock, he's done a lot of grasping, hasn't he? This is the health minister who legislated to allow our loved ones to die alone in hospital because we couldn't visit them, from the elderly to young children. They limited us from attending the funerals of those we lost, so people had to choose who got to say goodbye to Granny or whoever that might be. This is the health minister who demanded his Scottish counterpart resign for breaking COVID rules he'd written because that guy had broken the rules to see his mistress, yet wouldn't do so himself initially when caught out doing exactly the same thing. In fact, in Hancock's case, it's worse. He hired his lover as an aide on £15,000 a year of taxpayers' cash during the pandemic. She's a shareholder in a lobbying firm, and her brother happened to get a shed load of government health contracts. Hancock went to Johnson to say sorry, and that apology was accepted by Johnson, as if Johnson speaks for the entire nation. It isn't fucking Johnson that you needed to apologise to, was it, Hancock? It was us. It's to everyone who said goodbye to a loved one from afar as they died alone in hospital. It's everyone who was relying on a decent health service to save them when the staff, in fact, couldn't even keep themselves safe for lack of PPE. It's to the families of care home residents who you sentenced to death by sending COVID into their homes. I couldn't give a shit who you're sleeping with, mate. But when it's public money being spent to facilitate it, when you're grinning inanely on TV at awkward questions thinking you're oh so clever and oh so funny, when you're faking tears while smiling, when despite this or dodgy contracts or blatantly lying in Parliament or in public, and yet still you refuse to resign and are never, ever sacked, it's just a little bit too much to take. And in the end, that resignation came from, I'm told, pressure from other Tory MPs. So whichever way you colour this, he should have been sacked, though. My God, what an awful, weak, risible man Boris Johnson is that he couldn't bring himself to do it. How do you guys find that?
Well, I mean, if ever there was an open goal for the Labour leadership, such you could much more gaping one than that. And you know, the Keir Starmer managed to come late to that party, managed to make himself look very silly by calling for Hancock to be sacked after he'd already resigned. The only time he seems to be prepared to front up. You know, whether he was trying to get in on a bit of credit or something for the removal, I don't know. But back in February, he specifically said he didn't want Hancock to resign, even though he'd just been found to be unlawful in his contract dealings, and has had another case against him since then. And I don't recall anything from Keir Starmer at that point. But you know, the polling suggests that you know, the Tories lost 3 points in the past week, and Labour decided to capitalise on that by losing 1 point. So, you know, if anything sums up what's wrong with politics and what's wrong with the Labour Party at the moment, it's the fact that the Lib Dems seem to be the beneficiary of the disastrous performance of both the Tories and Labour, and they're led by Ed Davey, who is, you know, almost invisible. And when he isn't invisible, he might as well be, because he's not the kind of person who's ever going to make an impact, even with his very small hammer when he's trying to knock down a fake brick wall. So, you know, for the Lib Dems to be getting the bounce and not the Labour Party just about sums up how absolutely awful the whole thing is at the minute for, you know, and what you could loosely term leadership level, even though it wouldn't really merit that description.
I'm disgusted by Matt Hancock. I think he should have been sacked the moment it was found he had acted outside of the law. And obviously the department that have made decisions about our life and death matters have been found as being or accused of being guilty of social murder. 150,000 of our people are dead because of the decisions of that man, because of the contracts that he personally has awarded to people. And yet, you know, we had nurses and doctors working in bin bags because they weren't given the PPE that they needed to do their job safely. And we know that medical workers are 3 times more likely to catch and die of COVID than the rest of the population. It's absolutely unforgivable. And of course, through this crisis, we've seen the awarding of contracts without any competition, without any scrutiny whatsoever, going to mates of the government, Track and Trace, to name but one of the many. Billions and billions and billions of pounds have been paid out to companies to not provide a service. And that he should have gone, and that Ferrari seems to be about him getting up to no good with a person that he's employed behind the back of his wife and her partner. It just astonishes me when you listen to the radio phone-ins. Everyone's like, oh, well, the man's got no morals, he's not fit to lead. And it's just like, you're worried about his morals now. What about his morals when he was consigning us all to our death? It's completely unforgivable. And of course, Boris Johnson is not really in a position to sack somebody for their lack of commitment to a partner, shall we say. But yeah, I mean, I'm really angry about it. And of course, the forthcoming NHS legislation is to hardwire the awarding of contracts without any scrutiny whatsoever. And it must be stood 100% against. And I'm really concerned that Sajid Javid, of all people, is now going into this role, and we are going to see the wholesale awarding of every part of NHS work to people who may well have links to the very people who are awarding the contracts. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. These are vested interests, and it's got to be stopped.
And there was an interesting little passage, I think it was yesterday, with the appointment of Sajid Javid, son of a bus driver, Sadiq Khan, the Labour mayor of London, son of a bus driver, didn't see fit to point out, well, hang on, do we really need an investment banker, obviously, in the NHS? What does that say about what the Tories' plans are for it? Instead, he sent him a personal message of congratulation via Twitter, saying how great it was that another son of a bus driver was doing well, etc., etc. And, if anything sums up, we a couple of years ago, we saw Stella Creasy, Labour MP, by the badge at least, chumming up with Hancock at a conference and tweeting about that with a considerable amount of glee about, well, who's going to have a go at me for doing this? It's just this chumminess with the enemy, and they are the enemy. The Tories are not the friends of the Labour Party. The Tories are not the friends of working people. The Tories are certainly not the friends of, not working people, vulnerable parts of our population, etc. And for Labour to be kind of, just this over familiarity and chumminess with them all is just scandalous, especially when they're in the middle of, at the very least, negligent homicide of 150,000 and counting of our people. And, it really does sum up what the absolute, kind of state of that is. And, what pretty much kind of encapsulates what's wrong with the Labour Party at the minute in terms of not providing any kind of concrete opposition. And I do just want to quickly show, if I can get it up on the screen here, one of our social telly occasional colleagues and a former deputy chair of the British Medical Association, who was Dr. Kailash Chand, who put out a message this morning to Hancock that really kind of showed how it's supposed to be done. And a bit of this from the Labour Party certainly wouldn't have done any harm whatsoever. Let me see if I can get this working.
The book on pandemic will certainly have a chapter on Matt Hancock. And the headlines, the title of that chapter would be Incompetence, Corruption, Lies. Mr. Hancock, you have nothing to be proud of. Vaccination rollout was a success. Had it been you would have passed that on to private sector as you did it for test place. You provided over 120,000 tests, 20,000 in care homes. You've given millions and billions of contracts, Tory donors, your friends, ready with your narratives. I thought Edward Lansley jumping Hunt the worst and second place, but you have beaten them this time. Congratulations. Sajid Javid, new health secretary, has a mountain to climb. Claim for son of the bus driver and have mountain of experience in finance, in business management, to deal with the unsurmountable problems of NHS. My dear friend, if you are sincere, just remember, knowledge and experience without virtue is very dangerous. And you lack in virtues. So, save NHS on these upcoming reforms. They will finish or kill that NHS in my view. Look after the workforce. Without a workforce whose morale is really down, NHS can't survive.
So that's Kailash there showing what opposition looks like, where he's oh, that's still playing. He's told, he's laid it out there. Matt Hancock's going to be remembered for incompetence, corruption, and lies, and his replacement Sajid Javid doesn't have the moral fibre and virtues, as Kailash put it, to that the job needs if it's going to be any good for the health service. Awful people succeeding awful people, and nobody really getting the reckoning that they're due. So, I mean, that's the state of things with the Tories at the minute. But there's also the issue with the fact that Keir Starmer tried to, he spent months not calling for Hancock to resign or be sacked, but specifically said he shouldn't resign or be sacked and didn't want him to resign or be sacked. Suddenly, then jumping in after he's already gone, saying, "Well, Boris Johnson should have sacked him." Well, I can say that, at the time when it was relevant, not now when he's already bloody gone. And he got absolutely taken to pieces for that on social media, with loads of people pointing out the fact to him that it was just in February he was saying he didn't want Hancock to go. And, the lack of opposition is just doing such damage to this country at the moment, because there's such a story to be told about the incompetence, the murderousness, the state murderers. I think it was Alice who put a comment up there on the screen. Of hundreds of thousands of people in this country, not just in the pandemic, but before that as well, through the measures that they've taken against disabled people and unemployed people, etc. And and yet we've got a Labour leadership, again, use that word, around those issues. Don't call it. Then is end up driving people away and making the Lib Dems look good, which is bloody saying something, really.
Where was Captain Hindsight with his no ifs, no buts type comment when we've stood by and watched person after person be killed by a virus that was completely containable 18 months ago?
No, I mean, it's where do you start? I mean, I can't find the words. It angers me no end. I think Alice hit the nail absolutely on the head there when she referred to it all as state murder. It is. That level of incompetence is intentional. They have got no interest in putting people first. It is always, the economy. They should be more worried about the economy. Why else would Boris Johnson say things like, let the bodies pile high in their thousands, or say about 80-year-olds worrying about when they're going to get their jab? Oh, they should be more worried about the economy. The economy is all they give a damn about. And they're stuffing that up too. So let's be honest. These are
not... They crash the economy by not looking after the people. If you look at the countries that are doing well, the ones that handled it and protected the people also protected their economy, because the two things go hand in hand. Idiots and monsters that run this country, and I use that word very deliberately.
Yeah, but just coming back to Alice's point again,
as long as they protect their particular clique and class, and that's what this is, class war, and we need people to be aware of that and pick a side.
You're right, Steve. I mean, I don't even think this is about the economy. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the economy. It's got everything to do with the billionaires who have never had it better. And we are paying for that. That's off the backs of you and me and our brothers and our sisters and our aunties and our uncles. Every one of us is affected by this negatively. How many super yachts can any one person have?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to Alice's point, state murder. If the Tories are guilty of state murder, then the Labour Party, with their absolute failure to oppose in any meaningful way, shape or form, have made themselves accessories to it.
Yeah.
Starmer, back in February, refusing to call for his resignation when all these crony contracts came out, all of his incompetence came out, and he had an opportunity there to go for the kill. And he said, I don't think people really want him to resign. Yes, we do. We wanted him gone ages ago. He's a Tory for a start. Never mind the fact that he's
everybody would want him gone if they had somebody telling him. Everybody would want him gone if they had somebody actually telling people what he'd been doing rather than just allowing the media to keep whitewashing him.
But if I could believe yesterday when he tweeted out, actually, I'm glad that he's gone. Well, why weren't you calling for it then? What is wrong with you, man? Does somebody need to grab you by the lapels and physically shake you? Do something. Oppose. You know, you're not on their side. You're supposed to be everything that isn't them. Do something about it. Call for his resignation then. Call for Johnson's head while you're at it. Because at the end of the day, Johnson should have sacked him for this level of incompetence. This danger, the lives that have been lost. I keep calling it incompetence. It's not. It's intentional. This is state murder, as Alice Bennett has absolutely put it.
Well, let's not forget, I mean, this last spring, Hancock, and it was a barefaced lie, sat in front of the TV cameras and stood possibly and claimed that the government was throwing a protective ring around care homes. And at the time, and still, as far as I'm aware, official government policy was and is to send people, even though they know they're infected, get them out of hospital into care homes if they normally live in a care home. And the only reason for it appears to have been that the Tories could then boast that the beds weren't full in the hospital, so that they could show up and say, we're managing this really well because we're not even full. But they were keeping it, they were keeping beds empty by sending people home to die without treatment. And then he sat in front of the cameras on the one of the breakfast programs, I think it was, and said, everybody's getting the treatment they need. No, you were deliberately withholding the treatment they need and allowing people to suffocate to death and spread it to other people for them to suffocate to death in order for your PR and bloody political, profiling, etc. And I keep using this term, it was criminal. It is literally criminal. It's got to be criminal. Misconduct in a public office at the very least. And really, I suspect nobody here disagrees that it should be, some form of homicide, whatever applies, should be getting charged to these people. They shouldn't be allowed to resign and drift off quietly into obscurity, or more likely knowing the Tories come back in another bloody job in 6 months' time. They should be in the dock, doing the perp walk in handcuffs.
Yeah. It needs to be a day in court. I think they call it democide, don't they? When it's a specific demographic that's targeted. For the sake of some good press, he sentenced people of a certain generation, people who are residing in care homes, to death. It was a death sentence. It wasn't a protective ring. It was a death sentence. That disease was put into those homes with them. It was allowed to spread, and they were the demographic most vulnerable to it. And it blew through them like wildfire. It was absolutely tragic. And, there's a certain tragedy that generation, that demographic, that age bracket, shall we say, is one that is alluded to be typically Tory voting at that. It is state murder. This was done with intent. This is murder. It simply is. He sent that disease into those care homes, knowing what it would do. There has to be a day in court for Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson for this.
Yeah, these people should absolutely be behind bars. And we saw at the start of the pandemic super spreader events, including horse racing and a football match. Then more recently, we saw in the Northwest no social distance, no mask required rave for our young people who've been deprived of any form of social contact for a year. And they experimented on our young people. I mean, how attractive must that have been if you've been stuck indoors with your mum and dad and not seeing your mates? It's completely understandable people want to do it, but we've still not heard the official results of that experiment on our younger people. It's not just our old people that they're killing, it's our younger people too. So we've not heard the results of that experiment, but we have seen that there are enormous clusters of the new Delta variant in the region that rave took place. So probably a lot of those young people had travelled from the local area to go to these raves and have taken the virus back to their communities. And we've seen, Damo, as well, in the wake of G7 happening down near St Ives, we've seen Cornwall's infection rates go up through the roof as well. And what's really bothered me this week is we're seeing a suggestion from the BBC that children who have been exposed to coronavirus should not be kept at home. They should still be sent to school. This is our youngest children taking this virus home to their families and home to their communities. The infection rates are going through the roof. There's 40% more people on ventilators this week than there was last week. And ventilators are not some moderate treatment for a problem with breathing. You are put into a coma to be put on a ventilator, and there are various other machines that are needed for, let's call it what it is, it's life support. This is serious, desperate medicine, and the number of people requiring that is going through the roof. Meanwhile, they're still taking away our acute beds in our hospitals. It is absolutely criminal, and these people should be behind bars as far as I'm concerned. And like you said earlier, Steve, anyone who's sitting quietly on this deserves to be with them too, because they are absolutely complicit in what's going on to our people, to the working class people up and down this country.
Yeah.
So we have an open goal for the opposition, and instead of tapping the ball home and running off to celebrate, Keir Starmer is at the moment in the process of imploding his entire team, as it seems, in his Loto, leader of the opposition's office, ironic name, where he seems to have sacked pretty much everybody at the top in preparation for the Batley and Spen by-election, which is weird because who's he going to blame when, as they expect as well, when that goes wrong? It's bizarre. It's what was it? I think it was Dennis Skinner who said, typical posh boy tactics. If something goes wrong, blame the servants, and that seems to be what we're seeing. And yet he's getting, it looks like panic because, you would think at least if he wants to try and cling on to the job, after the by-election, he'd start sacking people and trying to shift some of the blame onto them and look as though he's done something. But he's done it all, moved people sideways, moved them out, done whatever, but, removed a large part of his supposedly top team and replaced them then with out-and-out Blairites, with people who have, stood in lecture halls and argued that New Labour isn't dead and stuff, as well as being involved in some cases in the events in the leaked Labour report, which we still haven't had the findings on from the Ford inquiry. On the one hand, it looks shameless. On the other hand, it looks panicked. What do you make of it, Bonnie?
He's floundering now, isn't he? It really is time to step aside. He's got absolutely no leadership qualities whatsoever. He's not honoured a single pledge that he stood on to take the leadership. It's time to go. It really is time to move on. And there are a few people he ought to take with him as he goes, in my opinion.
An awful lot of them, especially if they keep posing for pictures with bloody Tories while they're at it. Starmer's leadership has been weak, risible, pathetic from the get-go, and we've called him out every step of the way. He is going to continue to keep blaming other people. That's my firm belief. I think on Thursday it's a foregone conclusion that Labour are going to lose it. I think it will be a foregone conclusion that Starmer will stay. I don't think he's going to go. I think they are going to keep him in place until they can change rules at conference to make sure a lefty can never lead that party again. And then that party will die because, frankly, look at the writings on the wall. Look at how they have performed under Starmer. He has as Bonnie has said, broken every pledge, every promise he's ever made, pretending to be this left-wing socialist when he's anything but and has proven to be anything but. And he has just rolled right across the party, attacking, the left of the socialists. God forbid the socialists exist in a democratic socialist party. He might as well scratch that word off the back of his own membership card now because he's never believed in it. And
Democratic
here we are.
Socialist and Party. Really, that's you
To
could remove all three and
suspend-
it wouldn't be any less true, would it? But,
Actually, if I can just come back 1 minute to the previous question, because I just wanted to mention Cornwall for a minute. Not that I'm biased or anything, but that G7 mess that happened in Cornwall, for the most part, Cornwall has avoided the worst of the COVID crisis. But you look at places like Carbis Bay and Housetown, which sit on the edge of St Ives where the G7 was held. You're talking 800% rise, 2,400% rise in cases. And they kept the media in Falmouth, which I find ever so weird, because St Ives is on the north coast of Cornwall, Falmouth's on the south coast. So traveling between the two, you're literally spreading COVID across the entire width of the county. And it does, and I must admit, there's a little bit, a nugget of useless information I've got here that tickled me slightly in a dark kind of a way. But Housetown, which is one of the worst affected places, this is a village that was a mining village that was formed by the then Tory MP for St Ives to house his workforce for his mine. So there's a sort of bitter irony that a place founded by a Tory has been absolutely ravaged by COVID as a result of incompetent Toryism. But anyway, back to Starmer and Batley.
well, yeah, I mean that's the. I mean, first off, we'll look at a couple of more general things first, and then we'll come specifically at the Batley, because there's been a real, when you think they can't sink any lower, they managed to dig under themselves somehow and drop even further. But we've seen him channeling Owen Smith this week. The obvious consequences of the lack of leadership, integrity, vision, whatever else you want to put, is members, leaving the party, certainly, even if they're hanging in there, certainly not funding anything that's going on at the moment. And we saw Starmer sending out a begging letter that was referring to your summer holidays having ice creams on the beach, which harked back in an unfortunate way to Owen Smith's ill-fated appearance in Liverpool in 2016 during the leadership challenge there, where, he couldn't even, he put free ice creams on and still couldn't get a crowd. And that really backfired. This might do the same. But we've also seen then that they're taking non-cash donations again now from huge accounting firms, providing them staff by the description of the accounting firm to have an input on the impact of policies, but not to form policy. Well, they were accused by none other than Margaret Hodge back in, I think it was 2014, of providing industrial scale tax avoidance schemes to people. And, if you're going to make a policy, it's highly unlikely that they're going to say that's going to have a good impact, because, the people that they exist to serve will not enjoy anything that's going to reduce their wealth and redistribute things a bit. So, how's the Labour Party going to get anything done, along the lines of what a Labour Party is meant to do in terms of genuinely leveling things up and actually addressing the unfairness and inequality in this country? But we will look at Batley and Spen because, take your pick out of YouTube. Bonnie, you up to speed with what's been going on in Batley and Spen with the Galloway stuff, because they've been, we're not advocating George Galloway as a candidate in Batley and Spen. However, the Labour Party should not be making false accusations, provably false accusations against a fellow candidate, because apart from anything, it's a criminal offence to do so. And Galloway has actually raised that and said that he's taking that further. So.
And that whole debacle reminds me somewhat of Johnson being challenged by the father of a critically ill child, who said, "Why have you got the cameras with you?" And Johnson basically pointed at the cameras and said, "There are no cameras here." It's just absolutely farcical. It's just farcical. People will vote Labour when they believe that Labour will do something to support them and their families. And at the moment, it's an ideology-free zone. There is no reason, actually, that people should vote for the sister of the former, tragically murdered, and that was absolutely awful. But there is no reason beyond that why anyone living in Batley and Spen ought to vote for Miss Ledbetter. When is the lesson going to be learned? They pulled the same stunt in Hartlepool. They lost that. Now, I don't think it's going to go particularly well for Labour in Batley and Spen, and it's really frustrating. Loads of us give up so much of our free time, lots of our passion, lots of our energy campaigning to try and get Labour gains. And the people at the top of the party are throwing them away while they're getting into bed with the very same sort of accountancy firms that are providing information to hospital privateers, companies that are involved in health insurance schemes and so on. They should not be forming the policy. We need to have a democratic voice at conference. And the other thing I just wanted to raise was this weekend is the very first women's conference. It's separate to the main conference, the main annual conference. And there's a lot of stories because of the way that it was rushed through. A lot of CLPs didn't actually put delegates forward. The compositing and various parts of the democracy are being rushed through, and it's happening online. And some of the participants are really concerned that they're not being given an opportunity to speak to proposals and debate motions and so on, which ordinarily at a conference you have people come up from the floor. It seems that the Labour Party don't understand how to operate technology and allow people to have their say. The conference has to be the sovereign body of our party, and the moment we're being told from the top what we need to believe, what we need to be out there trying to sell to people like some shady, secondhand car showroom salesman, it needs to be coming from the floor, not from above, and they need to start learning that lesson. I have a lot of real concerns about what's going to happen at annual conference in September. At the moment, it's planned to be an in-person conference, but quite frankly, the way that the numbers are going with COVID, I really can't see that. If it does happen, I can't see it happening safely. And there's going to have to be some serious thought given to how we access the democracy in our party. Otherwise, we're just going to carry on losing.
This is why I think they'll keep Starmer in post until they get to conference, because conference is Labour's sovereign body, and they'll change the rules and they'll make sure a lefty can never get back in again, and they'll call it democracy in action. As far as the comparisons to Owen Smith go to Keir Starmer, at least when you asked Owen Smith for a 99, you got an ice cream. With Starmer, all you get's a flake. In Batley, I know I've saved that one up for the last 2 minutes.
Very good.
Anyway, Batley and Spence, it's horrible. I mean, Kim Leadbeater was given the position essentially because the Labour Party are trying to use emotional blackmail in order to save Starmer's arse. That's the only reason she's got the job. She was barely in the Labour Party for 5 minutes. Far more experienced councillors were overlooked in favour of putting her in post. I think the rule book was bent, which they were allowed to do.
12 months and she'd been in for a month. So
yeah, so they bent the rule slightly, although that's permissible. It still sucks. But she's shunned interviews. She's run away from hustings. She's hidden behind various apparatchiks in order to avoid journalists from talking to her. I mean, I've seen a video that Ollie Dugmore of Politics Joe has put out on social media where he tried to engage with her in the street, literally in front of her. Could you spare 5 minutes for a chat? And she's shaking her head and saying, no, I can't. You need to go through the Labour Party. You need to speak to such and such. And, of course, the person that he needed to get permission from would not pick up the phone. He was actually speaking. I think he was speaking to Naz Shah at one point with Kim Leadbeater behind him, as if as if Shah was the candidate. And
let's have a look at that, because people, some people might not be aware of what the events were. So we'll quickly, I'll put it up on the screen and we'll come back to you, Demo, if that's all right, because I just want people to make sure people know what was going on with that. So we've got this situation where Kim Leadbeater, I don't know how you meant to pronounce it, went onto Byline TV and said she felt extremely intimidated by a group of men, mostly men, she said, who were was shouting at her in the street. It doesn't appear to be particularly shouted. He certainly seems to be annoyed. She seems to be holding her own quite well. But the claim was then that George Galloway was across the street laughing. And this was her words, like on the other side of the street, laughing at her being harangued and in the group of men. And Star jumps in on the act again. The abuse Kim Leadbeater has faced is disgraceful. George Galloway's poisonous politics have no place in our country. The best way people can counter is by voting for Labour and Kim next Thursday. So it's a fairly naked piece of electioneering. But unfortunately for Labour, the whole thing was filmed. And George Galloway came back onto this then on Twitter. This claim is a false statement against an election opponent and a criminal offence, which, making false statements is. We have photo and video evidence of its falsity. I put all concerned on notice. And there's a longer video by Joe, which is linked, joe.co.uk, which is linked on my site, but this is just a short clip put together so people could get a bit of an idea as to what went on. And, essentially, as the video evidence and the journalist, Ollie Dugmore, who was there, noted, George Galloway wasn't on the other side of the street. He was down the street, at least the length of the football pitch away, which, makes it highly unlikely that anybody could tell, presumably, that what he was doing with his face at the time. But there's certainly no evidence whatsoever to indicate that, that he was doing anything untoward on this. So this is an excellent bit of journalism by Doug Moore at joe.co.uk here, and this is just a short clip.
We were at the Medina Masjid when Joe Cox's sister, the Labour candidate, Kim Leadbeater, was heckled in the street. Now, a lot's been said about what happened, and not all of it is factually accurate. So I'm going to try and set out what I saw, what I know, that doesn't really fit anyone's narrative and reveals some of the lunacy of modern politics. Around down there, there's Mr. Galloway, who, whatever you want to say about him, has given us plenty of his time, and then back over here on this side. It's not an option. In the hour before we arrived at the mosque, he was not in Galloway's entourage. As far as I could tell, he was already at the mosque when we arrived. When the altercation took place, Galloway was a good 100 metres down the street. Once things had calmed down, I had the opportunity to question him about events. Being honest with you, I found it, particularly towards the end there, the last stop we were on, when things got a little bit heated. The Labour that's why I left.
I always leave promptly because the last people I tend to get into the worst arguments. They tend to be the zealots on either side. But look, there is obviously an election. There are divisions. You're trying to convince people to vote for A rather than B, or C, D, E, F, G. In this case, there's, I think, 16 candidates standing. So obviously, you're going to get a bit of division. It's important that it's kept in the proper limits, however, and that's what we try to do. That's the instructions everyone has, and it's why I voted, of course, just as soon as I saw the temperature rising.
What happened today is not as simple as Kim Leadbeater is our saviour or George Galloway is a piece of work. Having been there myself, I'm not entirely sure what to make of it myself. What is true, though, is that a falsehood can travel all the way around the world before the truth has got its trousers on.
He's right.
He is, and that's that's one of the most scandalous things I can recall seeing in a while. I mean, Labour seems to expect it's going to lose this election. Doesn't seem to think, but they clearly identified Galloway as they can pick up a few votes from him, from the usually Labour Muslim voter base in that town, and yet surely it's got to backfire that they have been caught out. Did they just think they weren't going to get caught? Is it just that arrogance? That you just think you can, it won't come back on you because nobody will know? They must have known. They knew the reporter was there because he'd been trying to contact them. They must have seen the cameras. What the hell were they thinking to make an accusation against this guy? Whatever you think of him, he shouldn't be, attack him on what he does say and do. Don't make up stuff about what he's supposed to have said and done. Then turns out, as far as we can tell from the video evidence available and Ollie Dugmore's analysis of it, it was not true. And yet, that the newspapers, even after that reality came out, was still continuing to both sides this kind of issue and say, Galloway's claimed this and the Labour Party's claiming that. There is evidence that shows what is true. Journalists should not be, just making out as though both points of view are equally valid when, there is evidence showing that one is more true than the other, let's say. So, that's to me, it's horrific. If you're going to lose, don't trash your credibility and your integrity in the process, as Keir Starmer has done by jumping on that and assuming that he can get away with with these not just even the kind of poisonous politics and stuff, based on this particular incident, which turns out not to happen. So all you do is then make people think, well, actually, if you have a tendency to side with the underdog, and you can see somebody getting smeared, that's going to drive voters to the person getting smeared, not the other way around. It's just absolute absolute horror to my mind, as somebody who believes in the principles of the Labour Party, which is just being trashed at the moment.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Whatever you think of George Galloway, I mean, he was quite vocal in his intent of going to stand in Batley and Spen, specifically to make sure that Keir Starmer didn't win, because he wants him gone. And I think in that regard, an awful lot of us are agreeing with George Galloway. I think we don't agree with him on an awful lot of other things, though, and we certainly aren't endorsing him in any way to win this. Equally, Kim Leadbeater is standing for a party that doesn't appear to stand for anything whatsoever. But despite that, I certainly don't condone the abuse that was very real in that footage that was being aimed at her. Although I think the people who were doing it were not from Batley and Spen at all. I mean, they'd gone up there to stir up trouble and cause mischief. But that video footage clearly shows where Leadbeater was, where Galloway was, and the Labour Party line does not add up. And they have gifted George Galloway a day in court, essentially, against them, which I'm sure he'll take, quite frankly, for defamation of character and smearing his name. When the evidence is there on screen, video doesn't lie.
And this is one of the key things that occurs to me through Starmer's leadership. He's had a very friendly press, a sort of press that Corbyn could only possibly have dreamed about. They've bent over backwards to paint Starmer in a positive light, and yet they are still being, they're still trying to manipulate and tell lies. This proves more than anything, actually, why we need our own independent media, so that we can get the truth out there. It's only because of Joe and other independent broadcasters and news gatherers that we're hearing that these things are happening. And I heard as well this morning that there are currently plans to privatise Channel 4, which is deeply, deeply troubling. We don't need another Fox News type channel. Channel 4 is out there and it actually has provided more balanced coverage. It doesn't get everything right, but it's provided more coverage of important issues. I mean, I remember the program they did about Momentum, which was an absolute attempt at a stitch up, but it was ridiculous. It fell on its face. But they have funded a lot of the films and a lot of the arts and various things like that. We don't need any more private interests into our news feed. We need social interest. We need socialist telly, and we need many, many more outlets like this to make sure that the news is covered fairly. Because without that, there is no scrutiny of our politicians. They can get away with saying there are no cameras here. They can get away with saying, oh, but George Galloway, he thought it was really funny, and all that kind of speculation. They need to be held to account, and we need to support all of our independent media.
But they will continue to hide behind the idea that the BBC is independent and neutral and all the rest of it. It's become a farce. It's a joke. But Channel 4 has become far more so. But because it receives a chunk of the licence fee, I think, as well, it's ripe for plucking and turning over. And if they want to turn it into another Fox News, I would caution that, because look at how well GB News is doing at this moment in time. I mean, they've lost Andrew Neil already after 11 days or something like that, or he's gone on a sabbatical and hasn't said when he's coming back. It doesn't look good for them at all, does it? If they want to do that to Channel 4, then Channel 4 is going to go under as well. It's just,
but the thing is, I mean,
these
outlets are being used as human shields, essentially, for the establishment figures to get away with what they want to get away with. So we saw, the very first news conference that anybody from GB News had attended, they got the first question, I think it was. When the Labour Party wouldn't about it UK, because they couldn't trust him to give the version of reality that they would want people to hear, and they will run to, if they want to leak anything, they want to get an article out or whatever. I mean, some of the more shameless ones will go straight to, the Murdoch scum or whatever, whatever kind of horrible right-wing press, which is bad, which is even worse. But, the rest of them will run to some, one of a handful of laughably called moderate left kind of publications or whatever that, can be relied on to push out the particular line that they want, whether that's on a leadership thing, whether that's on, the latest smear against some poor sod who's, upset Keir Starmer or whatever else it is. And that'll get breached out and treated, repeated as fact by that lot as well. And, the reality is, somebody like joe.co.uk, and they've got to take my hat off to them. That was a cracking bit of journalism to actually get in there and reveal some reality against the best efforts of. But you can see they wouldn't talk to him. When she didn't get drawn into chipping in one fact in the longer video that they showed, she answered one question about something from a distance while he was talking to Naz Shah. And then he said, does that mean we can have a chat? No, we don't want to do that. We're not going to talk to somebody who might ask us a question that we don't want, we don't want to answer, that we don't want a bit of scrutiny. And, it just drastically, it neutralizes democracy in this country to the point where it's essentially non-functioning in a lot of ways now.
Now, how can you have a representative to speak for you when she refuses to speak? It's beggars belief. It's insulting to our intelligence, frankly. It's insulting to the intelligence of Batley and Spen residents that they think this person is someone they'll vote for. Joe's, Ollie Dugmore's bit of footage there was absolutely fantastic journalism, very much in the right place at the right time. But if you wanted proof of your point that they go running to the Murdoch press or the worst press, and they want to sort of, encourage people to lean towards their kind of writing once again, then you come back to Matt Hancock all over again, and that security footage that may have turned a few people's stomach online. Bonnie's face, see, she's watched it, see. How did the Sun get that footage? I read somewhere earlier they'd had it for about a month. How did they get it? This is security footage from Whitehall.
Well, there's one account that claims to be an MI6 or some kind of intelligence services source on Twitter that said that that leak is now being investigated because their concern is that Matt Hancock, may have been subject to some kind of blackmail or coercion or whatever, that in an attempt to twist his arm by holding that over his head. Now, I have no idea whether that's true, but that's the claim that's out there.
What sort of media is it that would do that?
Yeah, in the old days, you'd get vetoed pretty quick if you tried to get a job and had skeletons in your closet that could be used against you or whatever. So, it's just how the standards and kind of basic probity in politics in this country has slipped away to less than zero now. Essentially, is it's becoming more and more glaringly obvious. And the only reason I think more people aren't up in arms about it is because they don't get told, by the sources that they go to for whatever news they get time to consume. They don't get told that by people. In some ways, it's surprising. When a certain former Tory Prime Minister was, allegedly, was accused of performing a sex act with a part of a dead animal, the BBC ignored that completely. You know what I mean? And that was a serving Prime Minister. And everybody was talking about it, and the BBC just steadfastly refused to even refer to it in passing. It's just this protection. They treat themselves more like a protection detail than anything that's supposed to scrutinise and hold to account.
So the Labour Party have got a friendly establishment media. They've got the most genuinely catastrophic government in this bunch of Tories, and yet we're still, how many points that we are behind? How many points lead have the Tories still got, despite killing over 150,000 of our people in the last 18 months? It makes no sense.
Anybody will be 20 points ahead.
You need policies. You need something to stand for. You need politics that people can get behind. I mean, this is why it's so risible that people are saying, the Lib Dems are on the rise again. Now, it's another Knight of the Realm leading another party in this country, but the Liberal Democrats are renowned for standing for absolutely nothing. They don't have policies. They just sit in the middle and don't promise anything particularly.
That's probably why
Labour always should always be to the left. Corbyn had policies coming out of his ears. People used to say, he's got too much policy. He's promising far too much. How can we possibly have all this? Well, we bloody well could have done. Because look at the amount of money Boris Johnson has spattered up the wall. Test and trace, for example. All these crony contracts, it's billions and billions and billions of pounds. And we all said we couldn't afford Corbyn. We've afforded for the profligacy of this Tory government in recent years. You know, this is what happens when you live in a country that is in control of the production of its own currency. You know, they can just print it. They can make as much money as they need to spend, and they will do so, and they are doing so. Oh, but we can't burden the future generations with all this debt. We give Corbyn what he wants. Look what's happening now. They're going to be paying for this COVID crisis for decades. The kids being made to go to schools. You know, not just Cornwall and the G7 causing an upsurge in COVID. The rest of the country, especially in the north of England, again, we're seeing it on the rise, exponentially yet again, even though people are getting vaccinated. And you've got this, schools driving it again. And, the kids are still in school, still having to go. And it's on the rise again. The same mistakes are being made again. They're going to end up paying for it in the future. And the long-term effects for the health of the rest of us, they'll be paying for that too. Whatever they could be.
Yeah. Now, we like to try and end the program off on a positive note if we can manage to find anything that's positive, which is sometimes a bit of a challenge. But this last week or so, we've seen... Oh, go on, Bonnie, you've got a finger up.
I was just going to say, I can give you a positive. Obviously, I'm in London, and Sadiq Khan was recently re-elected to be mayor of London.
No,
and
that's not the positive.
Wait for it. He's extending the ultra-low emission zone to the North and South Circular. And what that means is ordinary people living in London will have to pay £12.50 a day to drive around our own city, right? First of all, that's outrageous. Obviously, we've got to work to bring pollution down, but the main problem isn't the fact that you or I are driving to our grandparents or taking our kids to school or whatever. The problem is much, much bigger. The causes of pollution are much bigger than that. But Sadiq's got a solution, right? It's a good thing. If your car is going to cost you £12.50 or you can't afford to pay £12.50, Sadiq's got the answer. Do you want to know what it is?
Go on, Bonnie, tell us.
Just buy a new one. So thank goodness, there's a bit of good news. We can all go out and buy a new car. Isn't that fantastic? There's a man that's in touch with the working class.
It really is
struggles.
Isn't it? Let them. Well, they can't get bread. Let them eat cake.
Remind me, he's the son of a bus driver, isn't he? Where's the public transport angle in this?
Well, he's also in charge of the massive budget for transport for London. And the problem is, the reason I have to drive places is the buses don't do the job for me. Sometimes you need your car, and everyone can't afford to go out and buy some hybrid electric vehicle or some new petrol vehicle or whatever. Your car you've got, if you're lucky enough to be able to afford a car in London, which is extortionately expensive with more and more boroughs charging you to park outside your own home. If you're lucky enough to be able to afford that luxury, but you can't afford £12.50 to drive around your town, if you're struggling to find £12.50, just go and get a new car. Where's this man's head? Who does he think he's kidding?
Yeah, well, he's forgotten his bus driver roots on a number of fronts on that one, hasn't he? But looking at it genuinely positive, the big thing from the last week or so really that we've seen, I think, is the surging kind of emergence of ordinary left. Now Demo's got the banner there behind him, looking very good. We've got it up in the top corner. And a lot of the reason for this is that we used to badge these catch-ups as Labour left, but lots of people in England now are on the left and not on the Labour Party. Probably always will have been. But in Scotland, there is no Labour left essentially, or very little of it, and a lot of people don't have the time of day for the Labour Party. In Ireland, you can't really join and stand as a Labour candidate. So, ordinary left is about the fact that it's essentially the opposite of the blue tick left. It's about being down to earth, about being real, about being, the fact is that things are ordinary because there's a lot of them. If it's rare, the opposite of ordinary, then it's, there's not much of it. But the ordinary left is the vast mass of normal, kind of left-wing people, and the, by, in the parliamentary level, hardly as we've seen, There was a video that Ordinary Left put out this last week where, was it the first 29 Labour MPs ever to get into Parliament? 23 of them came from working class trades. And I don't have the data for the other 6, but, now we've got, I think overall less than 3% of MPs come from, any kind of manual labour background or doing, real work, if I want a better phrase, before they become MPs. I think about half of them come from being either PPE students, politics and whatever at university, and a good chunk of those then get into Parliament by having worked for an MP previously, often for free, which puts that out of the reach of people who are on income limitations and so on. And in the Labour Party, somebody said 1.5% of Labour MPs come from a manual working background. So it's actually lower in the Labour Party than it is overall, and it's the freaking Labour Party. The clues in the name is supposed to be the party of just working class people. And I say working class, not just working people, because there are tons of working class people who are full-time carers, can't get a job, or are infirm or whatever. It doesn't take away their class identity. And, we stand in solidarity with them exactly the same. But, that has taken off. We've seen, I think, was it 9,000 or something followers already on the main Ordinary Left account in 11 days, which is staggering. We've seen, the video that they put out about the working class MPs has been getting discussed in Canada, in Australia, in Italy, in other countries who are looking at that and going, hang on, yeah, well, we used to have people from ordinary backgrounds in our parliaments as well. Where's that gone? And do we need to do something? I think it's just striking a chord. It's ringing a bell for people to say, well, yeah, actually, I do want to be represented by people like me in Parliament. I don't want it all to be, people who look more comfortable in a suit than a pair of overalls and wouldn't know the business end of a spanner if it pinched their backsides. And to me, it's an entirely welcome thing to have people who are, prepared to call a working class spade a shovel, and hold people to account. And we've seen a lot of that, and it's got a lot of regional accounts as well. And we've seen some good output from them actually on the issues of the day, saying the things that the blue tickers and the professional politicians want.
Yeah, I'm proud to be ordinary. It's what we are. I'm a carer now. I'm formerly a welder. I think when you look at Parliament, the Labour Party today, I mean, I can think Ian Lavery was a former miner. John Trickett was a builder. Struggling beyond that, to be honest with you. As you say, they come from fairly middle-class privileged backgrounds. They are not in touch with ordinary working class lives. And it's the party that's supposed to represent the workers and the working class, yet it doesn't contain them, or where it does, they're in a dramatic minority. It's got to change. It's got to stop. It doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon, especially if the likes of Starmer manage to pervade and his faction of the party continue to maintain control and stitch up conference later in the year. We could be in a lot of trouble as to where Labour is going to go into the future. So support candidates that are going to, support people who are going to represent you from a working class background, people who know what it's like to live your life, people who know what it's like to walk a day in your shoes. Because frankly, the selection of MPs we have in Parliament across all parties at the moment don't. It's utterly unrepresentative of this country. It's got to shift. It's got to change. So, perhaps some ordinary people can do some extraordinary things and bring about a bit of change.
Well, Bron Nichols is asking there, how do we join Ordinary Left? Well, I'll just say it's not as yet any kind of a membership organisation, and there's a lot of red tape that goes with that, but it is already inviting people to sign up to its newsletter, essentially, to keep informed as to what's going on. And that's just with the link that's going along at the bottom there. If you want to sign up for that, if you don't get to the point of being a membership thing, obviously that'll be the first place that they're looking to to invite people from. So it's very simple there. bit.ly/Ordinary Left News, and pop your details in there so that they can keep you informed as to what's happening. And do then look on Twitter for I think there's 20 odd local accounts now, as well as the main Ordinary Left one. Find the one that's nearest to you, and you'll be able to keep up with what they're saying about what's going on in your area as well.
And DMs are open on Twitter for the main Ordinary Left account. So if anyone's got any questions or wants to get more involved, they can just send a message to the @Ordinary Left handle, and they should hopefully get an answer.
Yeah, they're pretty quick.
Perfect. So we're just on the hour, so we'll probably wind it up there unless there's anything major else that we need to include. I do thank everybody for watching. I thank Bonnie and Demo for joining me on the program to
Pleasure as always.
hopefully make it an entertaining and informative hour for people to spend. If you're watching on catch up again, thank you for that. Do share and do make sure you do your bits and pieces on your preferred social media platform so that you can follow the Socialist Tally as well as Ordinary Left, and keep up with the latest output. Make sure you don't miss some good stuff. I will do a very quick plug for a program tomorrow on Socialist Telly with the Squawk Talk one, which I'll be running. We're interviewing Steve Howell about his book, which is very interesting, which he's written about his own family's experience of the McCarthyist kind of witch hunt in the United States in the 50s, and which spills over into my home city, Liverpool, as well, bizarrely. And we'll also have, again, from Liverpool, some of the people from the UCU, the Universities and College Lecturers Union, which is involved in a dispute at the moment with the university, where they said they were going to go on a marking embargo, and the university said, right, we'll take all your pay off you, but they're getting massive backing from the students there as well. So we'll be keeping in touch with all that going on. Do join us then. That's at 8 p.m. tomorrow night, again on the Socialist Tally, Twitter and YouTube, and on the Squawk Box Facebook. Thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy what's left of the weekend and have a good week ahead. Take care.
Cheers.